At the end of the Neanderthal era, Thorn starts a fire in a cave so the family can have a warm place to spend the night. After the kids fall asleep, Thorn and his pregnant wife Hera get naughty in a corner. The next morning, Thorn goes to a pond to get some shellfish. When he tries to climb some rocks, he slips and falls. His body is quite sore from the landing, but thankfully he survives. In the cave, Thorn won't stop coughing and Hera is very worried about his bruises. The following day, Thorn keeps coughing but it doesn't stop him from searching for food. Eventually he's too weak to continue so Hera takes him back to the cave. For the rest of the day, Thorn can only tremble with fever. His family gives him herbal mix to drink but it doesn't help. His chest is still bruised, so Hera makes a cut and drains some of the blood, then she covers the wound with herbs. This finally calms Thorn down. Sometime later, Thorn is still resting. Hera worries about their survival so she tries to teach her daughter Lark how to start a fire. It takes a few times before it finally works. An excited Lark runs to the cave to show her achievement to her father, only to discover that her baby brother has died. Thorn finally leaves his bed to bury the baby while his wife has a breakdown. That night, Hera is still in shock. Thorn makes some paint using plants and guides Hera's hand to leave a print on the cave wall. A few days later, Hera's water breaks while she's on a walk. Lark takes her back to the cave but Thorn makes her wait outside while her mother gives birth. A healthy baby is born, although Hera is quite weak afterward. As days pass, Hera continues to be sick. Eventually she dies, and Thorn buries her next to their baby. That night, he adds his handprint to the wall. Sometime later, Thorn manages to carve a little flute that he plays for his kids. After some thinking, he gives Hera's necklace to Lark. When they leave the cave to look for food, they're shocked to find other humans in the area, so they quickly hide and wait for them to leave. However, by nighttime, those people are still around. Thorn gathers their things and decides to leave with his children. The next day, the family discovers that they're being followed, so they try to travel faster to get away. A few mornings later, Thorn is awakened by someone poking his shoulder. He discovers it's the strangers, so he wakes his kids up and they try to run. However, the men surround them and stop them from leaving. Thorn runs to protect his children, nervous because he can't understand these people's language. He's a Neanderthal, and these are Homo sapiens. One of the strangers talks gently to them, making gestures to indicate that he's offering food. Thorn and Lark agree to try the dried meat and smile when they finally understand that the group means well. When the strangers leave, Lark wants to go with them. After some hesitation, Thorn agrees. When the group stops to camp, Thorn feels rather awkward and decides to play his little flute as a distraction. The others ask him to teach them and everyone loves the music, making Thorn feel more welcome. A few days later, they make it to a Homo sapiens village, where the locals are happy to welcome Thorn and his family. They manage to settle down quickly and feel comfortable in their new community. Thorn even likes playing with the kids. When Lark is old enough, she marries the man who rescued them. Both parents give them their blessings and everyone celebrates their union. In 2025, Claire and her co-worker Greg are trying to get dirty, but it's not going well. They realize they're too drunk to do this and decide to quit. Greg wants to sleep, but Claire kicks him out of her apartment. When he wonders if they can do this another time, she turns him down and pretends she's going to work. After Greg is gone, Claire takes care of herself with a toy. The next morning at Princeton University, Claire goes to work. As an anthropologist, she gets to study a Neanderthal skeleton. She receives a text from Greg, but she ignores it. During her lunch break, she sees Greg walking nearby and takes a different path to avoid him. Claire talks to her mom on the phone, sharing how excited she's about this new job. There's a chance to publish a paper, to discover where humanity comes from, and perhaps even cure cancer. In the evening, Claire finally texts Greg back with a very neutral message. Sometime later, Claire gets a call from her mother on her way to work and decides to ignore it. Later she receives a text from Greg asking her about her job, so she happily answers and they chat for a while. Then her mother calls again, so this time she picks up. She's devastated to learn that her mother has cancer and may not have much time left, so Claire ends up having a breakdown in the corridor. In the evening, she goes to a party and bumps into Greg. They go to his apartment and this time Claire successfully reaches her climax. It doesn't last long and Claire immediately leaves because she has to catch an early flight to Vancouver. The next day, Claire arrives at her mother's house. She admits she feels powerless and doesn't know what to do. They go together to the hospital and Claire has to watch her mother receive treatment. In the evening, she video calls Greg, and he's happy to chat with her even if it's the middle of the night for him. She tries to keep their conversation light, but eventually she breaks down and tells him that her mother is dying. He comforts her the best he can. When Claire returns to work, she can't concentrate because her mother keeps calling, and she promises to visit again on the weekend. Later she meets with Greg and after some naughty fun, she reveals she may have to quit her job to be with her mom. She's wrecked by the fact she may have to say goodbye to career-changing work. An hour later, Claire has a meeting with the dean and officially quits. She leaves the country after only sending Greg a message. On the plane, she can't stop crying. A few days later, Claire calls Greg for support. Her mother is in a really bad state and she keeps thinking she'll never go back to the USA, so she's afraid that their relationship may not survive. However, Greg has hopes for their future together. Sometime later, Claire's mother finally dies and Claire calls Greg for support again. The next day, Claire tries to call him but he has to work so he ignores it for now. Eventually he does call her back, but she's busy so she has to hang up quickly. In the evening, she texts Greg while he's having dinner with friends and he's unsure of what to do. Weeks later, the couple is on a video call and Claire points out they've spent more time apart than together. She goes on a rant on how she can't handle this anymore, only to accidentally say that she loves him. Greg finds it amusing and says he loves her back, but Claire is still grumpy. Sometime later, Greg comes to live with Claire. She shares that she's managed to convince the university to let her keep working on the research from home. Greg surprises her with a necklace made from the little object that the skeleton she studied was holding. Claire loves it and kisses him for it, but at the same time she knows it was very inappropriate to steal, so she has mixed feelings. For the 2029 holidays, the couple falls asleep on New Year's Eve, and they only wake up when they hear their neighbors celebrate at 00 o'clock. A very pregnant Claire wonders if they should move because this house is stuck in the past, but Greg likes it there. Claire then wonders if she should apply for a professorship and is clearly nervous, so Greg says they should go to bed for now. Claire checks on their son first and admits she isn't sure if she should take the job because it'd pull her away from the family. When the couple takes the kids to the museum, they find Thorne's flute on display. The Neanderthal art also looks like him, implying the skeleton was him and Claire's necklace was Harris. The tour guide says that Neanderthals weren't smart, but Claire and her son immediately correct him, pointing at the flute as proof. After the guide leaves, Claire reminds her son of the importance of unity, pointing out that the Neanderthals and the Homo sapiens formed families together. In the far future, longevity-enhanced pilot Coakley wakes up in an extremely advanced spaceship. She chats with her AI co-pilot Roscoe while doing exercise, asking if they've arrived at their destination yet. They've been traveling for 210 years, which means they still have 126 years to go. Coakley makes a joke but she feels very lonely. After making some repairs, Coakley has lunch. All the food is just the puree version of classic dishes. While eating, Coakley plays with the screen on the table and talks about the ship's impact deceleration. Roscoe tells her that's its job and worries about her state of mind, especially since Coakley hasn't been sleeping well. Then Coakley checks her plants and wonders if they're getting enough water. Roscoe checks the soil and confirms they are. However, minutes later, Roscoe announces that the oxygen level has gone down 1%. Coakley checks the plants in the greenhouse and discovers that some of them are sick. They have to disinfect the greenhouse and collect samples to find the contaminant, although supposedly there shouldn't be any. A few hours later, removing sick plants has resulted in the loss of 4.5% of productive mass. Coakley is quite upset by this and wishes she could hear something nicer, so Roscoe surprises her with a funny joke. While running the tests, Coakley asks Roscoe about their acceptable margin of error. Roscoe explains that losing more than 6% of the plants would equal mission failure, and Coakley can't help but chuckle at the feeling of doom. They've already lost 5%, so she needs to find the source of the infection and stop it soon. Some hours later, the situation hasn't improved. Roscoe asks what it's like to think about death, but Coakley don't want to talk about that. She tells Roscoe to turn off all non-essential electrical units to save on oxygen waste, even if the difference will be small. The lights go out and Coakley continues to work using a flashlight. Then Roscoe tries to get philosophical about the human mind, but it's interrupted when it gets an alert about a formula for an antiviral. Moments later the antiviral is sprayed on the plants, but sadly it doesn't work. Coakley turns off the screen, unable to look at the dooming numbers anymore. After thinking about the situation for a while, she comes up with an idea. Since they don't know which plant is the virus host, they should get rid of all of them. Once the oxygen is clean again, they can plant new ones. Roscoe points out that killing all plants will leave the ship without enough oxygen and it'd affect the human embryos they're carrying. Coakley realizes that she uses 98% of the oxygen, so she says she should self-delete and let Roscoe take the babies to the new planet, where robots could do all the labor. Roscoe doesn't think an AI could raise children and wants to look into ways to make more oxygen instead. It'll have to run some calculations to see if they can set up a backup greenhouse. Sometime later, Roscoe says that they should put the secondary greenhouse in the computer space. They could convert the mainframe to plants by using the algae on board. This would feed oxygen directly to the life support system. Coakley points out that this would permanently fry the AI, but Roscoe thinks the best use case for it is that humans survive. Since Coakley refuses to make this a game of who sacrifices themselves first, Roscoe agrees to run a simulation to see who is more likely to complete the mission. The next morning, Roscoe tells Coakley that it can't run the simulation because it can't predict her behavior. Coakley doesn't believe it and forces it to share the real result. Coakley has more chances of completing the mission. When she asks to see the math, Roscoe doesn't want to show her. Then Coakley checks the simulation herself and discovers there is only a 0.2 difference. She double checks the numbers and notices that there's a luck factor on her side. Roscoe explains that humans have a certain factor related to creativity and luck that is hard for her to calculate. Having no other choice, Coakley gets the manual and looks for a way to turn off Roscoe. She uses tools to open a panel in the wall and finds the computer's mainframe. Roscoe tells her about the lever on the podium and assures her that this won't hurt. When Coakley asks for any last words, Roscoe asks her to take good care of the children. Coakley says that Roscoe was her only friend and cries as she pulls the lever to shut the AI down. The next morning, Coakley feels lonelier than usual because Roscoe isn't there to chat. This doesn't stop her from working on transforming the computer room into a new greenhouse. It takes no time for plants to start growing there. Weeks later, the oxygen in that room is 100% clean. Ready to move on, Coakley checks the manual again to read about artificial wombs. It's extremely complicated, but she manages to set one up in the nursery. Unfortunately, the experiment fails in just a few hours. Coakley refuses to give up and keeps researching while trying the experiment over and over again. After several failed attempts, Coakley finally manages to produce a baby that she names V. When V is old enough, Coakley tells her how Earth was dying, so this ship was made to start a new civilization on a new planet. She also reveals that to achieve this plan, everyone on this ship had their DNA altered. The babies grow extremely fast so they can repopulate quickly, but Coakley ages extremely slowly to be able to complete the mission. She's an exception to the rule, since humans learn that living forever is actually a bad idea. The parallels between the three stories then become clear. Thorne teaches the new generation how to make fire. Claire passes her knowledge to her kids and pushes Greg into being a better father by making him talk to their son when they find naughty movies on the family tablet. Coakley makes 2 more babies and teaches V how to take care of them so she won't ever be alone. They take care of the plants in the computer room together, always saying, "Thanks Roscoe," when they enter. She also makes V run thousands of simulations a day in case of a crisis. V hates these simulations because they often fail, so Coakley gets serious with her. If one day something happens to her, V needs to be ready to take over and fight for the crew's survival. In the past, Lark is giving birth to her own baby. When that kid is old enough, the necklace is passed down. That night, Thorne relaxes by the fire and dies in peace knowing his family is safe. When the family buries him, they add another handprint to the wall and put the necklace in his hand. In the present, Claire and Greg hear their adult son talk about a new science called elixir that will help people live longer. Backstage, they leave the necklace for him with a supportive message. On their way home, they discuss the elixir and agree they don't want to live forever, since it makes life seem very improbable and finding the end adds meaning to it. When Claire dies of old age, her sons cry by her bedside. In the future, the alarm rings as the spaceship starts to shake until it finally lands on the new planet. Coakley suits up since she'll be in charge of investigating. Before leaving, she opens a drawer to reveal the necklace, which she gives to V as a sign of leaving her in charge. The spaceship opens and Coakley steps onto a land of flowers. Many years later, humanity has finally rebuilt a new society. V has grown so fast that she ends up dying of old age before Coakley, and she's buried with the necklace. Coakley returns to the old spaceship to have a breakdown, since no parent should see their own kids die. Make sure to subscribe.